the boxer Muhammad Ali once said, "I've never let anyone talk me into not believing in myself." And although I think it can sometimes feel like we've been in the ring when we've been teaching, he does have a point about resilience and strength, and that we need sometimes to go back in, particularly, after a tough day. So where do we find this strength? And the great news is that we already have it. So we have within us an arsenal of these character strengths, 24 of them, and that helps us with the positive energy and accomplishments and well-being. Now, the character strengths that you will find that you have inside, that will hopefully come up on the come up on the screen in a moment, are so the character strengths: wisdom, which is the capacity to gain knowledge for insightful understanding and good decisions; courage, the inner strength to face challenges, to persevere, to act in line with one's beliefs despite fear or difficulty; humanity, so within you, that ability to forge deep connections, which I think you'll very much have by showing compassion and kindness to yourself and to others. We've got justice, the commitment to ensuring fairness and building harmonious communities and working collaboratively; temperance or moderation, so that cultivation of balance and moderation that fosters self-control and conscious choices; and also transcendence, so the inclination to connect with the larger universe and draw meaning and inspiration from moments of hope and awe. And to make these broad categories of virtues tangible and actionable, Seligman and Peterson then identified a set of character strengths underpinning each one, which you can see on the screen, that were more kind of specific and measurable traits people could relate to and then also cultivate. And the list of 24 character strengths then was born, and kind of gave a list for people to be able to kind of recognize and measure and develop these strengths, and kind of, I suppose, a bit of a roadmap. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. So this strengths-based approach to self-esteem and work kind of helps when you lead and teach and live when times are hard. But why? Because it helps build self-awareness. Because when you know your strengths, what you're naturally good at, what energizes you, then you can understand yourself better and see why you handle challenges better and struggle with others. And I hope helps you not compare yourself so much with other people and think, oh, they're so brilliant at something. Why am I not? You have other strengths that they wish they had too. It helps boost confidence, self-esteem, and as adults, we come away from school and we get to focus and work with the strengths that we have. We don't have to keep, studying subjects we were no good at. So we start to shift attention to what's wrong and missing to what's working. And that's really important for us, that we look at what's working for us in our classrooms and how we teach. And I think when we're under pressure, which happens a lot, that's really helpful. Not what's wrong, but what's right. And it reminds you that you've got those really valuable skills: creativity, patience, humor, perseverance, and that makes a difference every day. It increases motivation and energy, and when you use your strengths, you tend to feel more alive, more focused, more resilient. And teachers who teach from their strengths, for example, using storytelling or songs, if you're very expressive, or structure, if you're very organized, often then feel less drained and more effective. And it also helps that sense of flow where effort feels more natural and enjoyable. It helps with well-being and reduces burnout. So there's a whole branch called positive psychology that's looking at what's right as opposed to what's wrong. And it shows that if you use your strengths and are aware of your strengths, it does help to reduce stress, to increase job satisfaction, and protect against emotional exhaustion, which we will all be very, very familiar with. So it's a way of kind of rebuilding your own emotional tank rather than always giving away from the empty. It improved relationships and teamwork. And I think when we recognize each other's strengths, excuse me, and trust and appreciation then grow, that that all of us in a school are going to have different strengths there. So we complement each other, notice what other people have, and it helps to build that supportive community, which is what you need in a school. You want lots of different characters and strengths. And it also helps model self-worth for pupils, because our children learn by watching. And when teachers know and value their own strengths, they show pupils that everyone has unique gifts, and it's not just the academic ability, not just those who are really good. And so it builds a classroom culture where effort and kindness and creativity and persistence are celebrated. So here I'd like you to pick what you think are your top 5 strengths, your top 5 character traits. And have we got time? I think we'll be sharing these. So why don't, in schools, you can have a bit of a game of character strength bingo later on, and see who gets to get a full house of bingo. So we'll have the next slide, please. So if you are not sure what your character strengths are, you can go onto this website, which is a kind of 10-minute character strength test, which might be able to help you to show which are your strengths, and have a think about how have you used your strengths at work? How did it feel? So what I'd like you to do is just put that into the chat at the moment. When you've used your strengths at work, how did it feel to you? Let's see what's going to come in there. It might take a while. So when you used your strengths at work, how did that feel as a teacher? Maybe it was, well, I know that I'm great at teamwork, and I really relied on that. I'm a very creative person, and that's the bit I love. That gives me the energy. Or I have great love towards my class, and actually I think the best thing you can do is to like your pupils. I think that's the best bit of kind of teacher training. If you like them, you're going to do a great job. So my energy was not overexpended when I used my strengths at work, so I could be tired but not fatigued, and a sense of satisfaction. There was steady progress. That's lovely. Thank you very much, Nina. Absolutely right there, because it does, when you are using the best of you, you know that you're giving your best, you're doing your best, and that's all we can ever ask for, really. Sometimes Hilary, if you could mute, please. Sometimes we overplay our strengths, and sometimes we do that maybe a little bit too much. So it's also being aware that, do we want to then bring in some of those other strengths as well? And it's also really important to share that with our staff group, and think, what's my colleagues' top strengths? I've really noticed that you have this strength. A basic tenet of psychology is tell someone they're doing something well, and they'll do more of it. So just have a think there. Is there anything that you want to work on? If you were to work on one of those, what would it be? I'm going to give you 5 seconds, and then we'll move on to the next slide. Thank you. So research says that if teachers prioritise their own well-being, we'll have the next slide, please, likely to have greater capacity to manage effective student behaviour, leads to better environment, that the research is quite big about how important it is, and that gratitude is really integral to well-being, and saying thank you and I really admire doesn't cost anything but has a huge impact. So for leaders, knowing that accountability measures are best when they're built around support and development, not just judgments, and really making teaching manageable. So it's not this never ending cycle of pressure, And so how do we do that into these actions? It's about using evidence-based practice. So finding what things have the biggest impact, and do that and cut the rest. So stop the stuff that you think actually that's just not helpful. I think it's what I'm meant to do, but I just don't think it's helpful. You consider how you establish clear boundaries for perhaps when there's just too much that is being asked for you outside of school hours, perhaps. Maybe supporting colleagues and leaders to ensure that you've got high quality shared resources that can be adapted to the needs of the classes. Where can we find those? Making sure that there's effective feedback that's not overburdensome. And research shows that marking and feedback are the biggest contributors to workload. So how do we do that in a more effective way? So on to the next slide, please. So flourishing is a theory of well-being which has got 5 key elements, and I want to look at these questions and rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 for positive emotions. So 1 is low and 10 is high. So positive emotions at work, how are you feeling? So do you experience a real positivity about work, or when thinking about work? Do you have that kind of joy in work at the moment? Do you feel good about it? So give yourself a number and note it down. Then I want you to do the same for engagement. So how engaged do you feel? How in flow? How focused do you feel when you're at work? Give yourself a mark from 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, for how you are when you're applying your strengths at work. And do you feel that your work aligns with your skill set, with your abilities? Do you have the appropriate level of challenge? Okay. On to the next slide, please. Okay, and then we're going to do the next, we're going to do the same for relationships as well. And again, 1 to 10. So how you get on with others at work, whether it's your colleagues, whether it's the head teacher, whether you've got a sense of belonging. Does that work for you? Do you have positive connections? Do you feel that you're kind of with the right people there, that the relationships are good? Again, a 1 to 10. And then the same for meaning. Do you feel like your work has got meaning? Have you got a sense of purpose? Do you feel like you're making a difference? You will be, but do you feel it? And how do you know you're making a difference? And how do other people let you know? And what do you feel about the impact of your work? So rate those with a 1 to 10 as well. Okay, and we'll go on to the next slide, please. And finally, for achievement, I want you to rate yourself 1 to 10, again, 10 with the highest, with that sense of personal or professional growth in work. How are you learning and achieving? Do you feel like you're moving on? I think we always learn every day in education. We reflect, we think, oh, I could have done that better, or oh, how could I have made that work a little bit better for this group, or this, if I'm teaching this. So what is it that you're most proud of? Are you ready for the next challenge? So what's that looking like? Okay, next slide, please. So here, what we're going to do is, if you would want, you could maybe kind of make a quick note of this, or later print it out, if you can. And you would just look at what your now is. And then I want you to think about what your ideal is. You obviously don't need it as a wheel. You can just do it as numbers. But what would be your ideal for positive emotions? Where are you now? What would you like it to be? What about engagement? Where are you now? What would you like it to be? Same for relationships. What's your ideal? Same for meaning. What's the ideal? What would you really like it to be for work? And what about achievement? Where would you like that to be? So then the questions are about what next? And next slide, please. So we think about that. So when you're looking at your numbers, what do you notice? Is there anything that stands out? Are there any areas there that you think, yeah, that area is actually, there's a big gap between my ideal and my now? Or actually, this area is working really well for me. This is actually is a bit of a strength for me, and I'm doing this really well. Maybe I could help somebody else with this. Maybe I'd like to celebrate this because actually I'm really good at this, or I'm really grateful for this. And then thinking about, okay, there's possibly an area that there's a bit more of a gap there. Which one was it? Is it about achievement? Is it about positive emotions? And what would it look like if things were a little bit better? And I use scaling a lot with people. So a scale of 1 to 10, tell me how things are now. And then what would be different, perhaps, if things were just a little bit better? What would be better? What would be different if you were one step up on the rung? So you're not looking at things that are totally better. You're not totally reimagining everything. You're going, what can I do? What's the next step? How do I do one more thing? So have a think about what your goal would be to make that one area just a little bit better. And how are you going to do that? How are you going to talk to people to help you to make that one area just that little bit better? So we were using something called the PERMA model then, and this is the GROW model. And so this is a case of what is your goal? Hopefully now you've got those 5 sets of numbers, 5 sets of 2 numbers. So you think, okay, the one area I would like to work on is perhaps positive emotions. And the rating I gave it was 6, and I'd like it to be 10. So what's the reality? What does it look like now? What does it feel like now? And then what ideas have you got to help? What are your options? So at this point, this is where you and maybe a colleague can think, right, how am I going to think of different ways to help this one area? What am I going to do? What are my small steps? What are the possibilities here? And then of all of those, so just, putting down lots of ideas there. Some might be completely ridiculous. Some might be great. And then which one appeals to you most and what is going to be your next step? So having a think about that. So that is in a nutshell how we can think about how to use our strengths, of which you will have many, and how we can think about work and how we can build the areas that we want to, but making sure we are using our strengths. The other thing that we can do in terms of making kind of building our self-esteem as teachers is teaching in ways that really engage our pupils and engage them in ways that our pupils love, that we can see that they're really happy, and we see that they're really learning, because that gives us a sense of satisfaction. We know that we're doing our job well, and that really helps as a teacher. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. What research tells us is that if we're making learning fun and interactive, that children really do learn best. So what are the kind of things that we can do to make learning really active and therefore quite fun, in a class? So lots of active responses, like sit down, stand up activities. So those stand up if a word starts with a p or a vowel. Sit if the number is even. Stand if this animal lives in water. Stand if it's true. Sit for false. Stand if this picture shows a circle. Or kind of show me kind of quick responses. So holding up your fingers to show answers. So 1 is a yes and 2 is a no. Or maybe using some recycled kind of, some bits of cardboard they might have found, or using hand signals for categories, like 1 finger is a noun, 2 is a verb, 3 is an adjective, or holding up a stone or a leaf for a kind of a yes or a no. All sorts of counting games and maths and literacy games there. So passing the count. So classes count aloud together while clapping or passing a ball, or you've got skipping counting actions, clapping on every multiple of 5. We could have sound jumping, so they're jumping for every syllable, ba, na, na, for example. Acting out concepts or story drama to help them with that kind of active role play for comprehension. So acting out stories or just using a few props always goes down a storm with children. Freeze framing your moments, show me what a character felt like at that moment, or retelling using gestures, who can show how the tortoise was walking, or using choral reading or echo reading, so all pupils are reading or repeating together, and lots of kind of repeating of vocabulary is really helpful. Vocabulary is a hugely important thing in learning. You might have an older pupil or teacher reading a line, the pupils repeat, or pointing to a text while the class read together, and lots of adding movement, stand when you see a full stop, clap for a capital letter, that kind of thing. Something I use quite a lot is kind of true and false corners. So one side is true, one side is false. You say a statement, the sun rises in the west, and they've got to move to the right corner. And my goodness, they love that. It's also, you can see who really knows it and who's just following as well. Hands up game for that kind of, quick engagement and scanning. So raise your hand if this is a fruit, raise your hand if this starts with a B. Who can show me through the fingers? And it's just really quick to see who's engaged. Choral repetition. So say it louder, say it faster, say it in a whisper, say it in a silly voice, say it like a robot, that kind of thing. So that they're kind of repeating things, but doing it in ways that they find are quite funny and silly, and therefore you get more there. Maybe some whole class celebrations are quite nice as well. Give yourself a rocket clap, a whoosh, or kind of wave your hands, or so those kind of things are very kind of interactive and fun. And if we go on to the next slide, please. Another thing is about using group and social learning, because they will learn a lot from each other as well. So, so that, for example, I would have a magic microphone, to a bit of rolled up paper, or just an imaginary one, and they would perform to read lines or text in silly voices, like a robot, like a whisper, like an opera. And just kind of repeating things, into the magic microphone that way. Making sure that there's perhaps a little bit of a brain break there, that there's short songs and claps between activities to reset, shake, shake, freeze, and 30 seconds to stop and get their attention, because we can't learn until we've got their attention. We need their attention first. So using those kind of signal systems as well, very important. Maybe a clapping and hand raised, whatever it is, and maybe little micro songs as well. So, show me how good looking can be, or just a little kind of call and response, or, hands on knees, eyes to me, 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing, or clap, zip, clap, click, zip your lips, that kind of thing as well. And finally, last slide, please. Well, not last slide, next slide, please. Is looking for simple assessment. So to know what it is that they've actually learned, because it's all well and good if we've taught it, but have they learnt it? Because that's the point. And I know for a long time as a teacher, I was very focused on what it was that I was doing, and sometimes not as focused on how it was landing for them. So I became more and more into, it doesn't matter so much about what it is that I do. I try and do my best here, but have they got it? And and there's those really short bits, so that quick, thumbs up if you understand, to the side if you're not sure, and down if you want a bit more time or want me to explain it in a different way. Maybe a few people just having an exit question, so one question, just to get a sense of who's got some understanding there. Sometimes I'd have a dice, and I'd make 6 questions, and we'd roll it, or and see, okay, so this is the question that you're going to have, or you're going to talk to your partner here about, and I'd go to the ones that I think, I'm not sure that you've really got this, or one thing I've learnt and do a think, pair, share. So you think what your answer is, you share it with your partner, and then your partner and you share it with another pair as well. So really kind of focusing on that as well is just, have they got it? Because I know what I I was like. Okay, and finally, just remembering that you are the resource that matters most, and you need to refill your cup so that they can keep refilling theirs. So take time to fill yourself with that rest, with that hope, with that pride in what you're doing. You are doing an amazing job. It is hard, it is relentless, but you keep going, because your students drink from that cup every day they take. You are givers, you are giving all the time, and if you need to look after you look after yourself. That is so important.
A few announcements before you leave. Thank you so much, Lovette, for those remarks. And thank you everyone for joining today's session. The attendance is quite something to be pleased with. We've got certificates that we'll be issuing at the end for your participation in this program. Please note that this is contingent on you filling out the post-webinar survey that I will be sharing in the chat briefly. And as Lovette mentioned, the next webinar will be about improving foundational literacy, which will be hosted by Meryl on the 19th of November. If you haven't already, please sign up and share it with a few colleagues, and we can enjoy an interactive session as well next week. And then finally, the Africanus Global Teachers Hub is now accepting members, and we welcome you to join this, and you can interact with some of the educators as well. Thank you guys so much for joining today's session. Thank you, Africanus, for hosting it and putting this together. And thank you, Alice, for such an interactive and engaging session. I'm sure we all found it incredibly useful.